Hey, what's up, guys? I am here to bring you my lecture series, and in this video, we are going to cover my first subject, which is ABC. What is ABC, you might ask? Well, it is art, business, and craft. So, what is this theory and why is it important for us? Well, have you ever played these video games where you have a character skill and you have a level to it? The way I look at art, business, and craft is the same. So, just like in those video games, I find that photographers come with a certain level of skill in each of these sections as well. And this particular paradigm and this particular framework is very useful to identify your opportunities and to see where you should go from here. What I mean by that is if you can have a map of what you need to do, and if you can have a pretty good image of where you are right now and the self awareness to kind of give yourself a score out of this map and paradigm, then you are in a good place to make decisions for the future. So, for me, this helps me realize where I am currently in my work as well as in my personal life with photography. And it allows me to see where I need to go or what actions I need to take in the future. So, hopefully, with me explaining this to you, you can put it to use for yourself and see and diagnose where you are and where you want to go. So in this video, I want to define each of these sections and as well as give you some high-level strategies that you can follow to improve each aspect. So let's get to it. First, let's talk about art. Some say it's your voice. Some say it's your signature that separates you from others. When you think of it that way, I think it makes it a little bit more mysterious and complicated, which makes figuring out what you have to do to get better at art a little bit harder. And it doesn't have to be that way. What I stumbled upon when I was studying art and photography is that the more I studied the art itself, I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know what the artist was doing to get the art that they were producing. So I started studying the biographies of the artists and some of my personal favorite photographers. And the more I studied them, the more I realized that there are things that are very common between each of them. So as I was studying them, I realized that there are four things that were very common between all artists. I found that they all explored their curiosity.
My father had a woman's specialty shop. It was called on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
It was called Avedon's Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
And Harper's Bazaar, Vanity Fair, and Vogue were in the house every month because they had to be kept up to date with what was going on in the fashion business. So I saw the most beautiful photographs by Munkachi, by Steichen, by Bruhl, of theater,
Yeah.
and of fashion. And the ones I liked, instead of putting baseball players' Dixie cup tops on my wall, I just tore them up and scotch taped them onto the wall, and I was surrounded by the great photography of the 30s as a sort of a visual influence. So it seemed, and in a family of mostly women, I was very aware of the fragility of themselves in relation to their looks, in relation to men.
One of the most important points that I always remind myself when doing a story or being in a location is to look for situations and be involved in things that you have passion, that you care about, stories that have meaning to you. At the end of the day, the pictures that I care about and I think are interesting and successful are pictures and stories that I felt very deeply about and that I cared about.
The next thing I noticed about artists is that they were constant creators, and they didn't care if they were producing good work or bad work. The best of them actually just kept making more work. So they were very much action oriented, and they were not stuck when they were creating. They just simply kept creating.
I think there's one thing that Cartier-Bresson, that Irving Penn, that
Right.
Dan Arbus,
Right.
all have that I share is a complete obsession with work. With work and work every day. If you do work every single day, the work hopefully gets better. At the end of your life, you have a body of work. Or the end of a month, you have a body of work. If you did 2 interviews, Charlie, that wouldn't be Charlie Rose. That wouldn't be what you're going to have when it's done. You've documented a time in our history.
Which is a chronicle of our time
That's
in the
right.
same way that your work is a chronicle of our
and
time.
you get better and better and better at it because it's like muscles that
Right.
if you do enough push-ups,
You're gonna
eventually
develop some
there's a little
tension
something
tone
going
there.
on there.
That's
Right.
The other thing I noticed with artists is that they were not producing work for fame or money for the most part. They were not producing work to become rich and famous. Most of them followed a passion or a love that they had for a certain subject, object, or person, and they continuously just kept obsessing over it and making work around that. So the work that they were doing was very much deeply personal.
As a young photographer, the first country I went to was India. I immediately fell in love with the culture, the people, the landscape. This was a place, this was an ancient land, ancient traditions, religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, that had gone back for hundreds, in some cases thousands of years, and it had such depth that although I've been back 80 or 90 times, it's a place I've never gotten tired of, and it's a place that you can travel and explore endlessly.
So the last thing that I noticed about artists, or at least photographers who are artists, is the amount of time they've been working on whatever interests that they had. They didn't usually give up in a year or two. Their work spans 10 years, a decade, even more than a decade. And some of these guys have been doing what they were doing for a lifetime. And what I find interesting is that they weren't sure when they were going to blow up. They just kept at it, and they kept at it because it was a deep personal love for them, and it wasn't something that they were doing for other people. So the last thing I want to kind of put down here is that that journey is a long timeline. So before I studied all the biographies of some of the artists that inspire me, I used to think that art was just following your passion or doing what you love and then just creating an outlet for it. But now I have a more concrete understanding of what it is to be an artist. And that is doing something that's deeply personal for yourself, following that journey for many, many years, and exploring your curiosities, exploring the things that you're obsessing over or you love, and not giving up and becoming very action oriented. And all artists that I love and admire share these traits, and I think we can learn from them, and we can take this into heart in the way we become artists, or whatever you want to call yourself as a creative, right? So how do you become a better artist then? How do you find these things that you love, or things that you could be deeply curious about, and find it to be something that's personal for you? How do you find these things? Well, one strategy that I learned was to go back into your own life. Go back to when you were a kid, when you were like 7 years old, or from 7 to 14 years old, when you were just growing up. If you can't really picture that right now, try and picture your childhood bedroom or your childhood home. Try and picture yourself when you were a kid at school. And then start thinking about the things that you loved, the things that you looked forward to. What were your hobbies like? What were your obsessions in that time and age? Are they still the same for you now? Are you still the same person? Have you changed? Are you in love with different aspects of life now? Do you love different things? You can start by asking yourself all of these questions and seeing if something pops up for you. For me, when I was a kid, I used to love video games, movies, music, and cartoons. And a lot of those things still inspire me, and a lot of those things are still part of my personal artwork that I create. And like many artists, I don't think that I need to create it for anybody else. I just do it for my own fun. I sketch, I draw, I paint, I do all of these things just for myself. And none of that is ever out there. It's just for me, just for fun. The other thing that I love is music, and then just kind of making music and making beats. And that's something that I do on my spare time as well. And that's just for fun. Again, these are things that I do on the side, but I also have personal projects that I'm following up in photography. And I think as a photographer, you do need a creative outlet within there to build your creative muscle. So find something that is within you, either from your past or now, that you can say is something that you really, really love, and explore that with your camera. One of the coolest quotes I've heard is Elliot Erwitt, one of my favorite photographers. He says, the best work he created is on his walk to the studio, and that made me think. I'm like, all the days that I go to work or go to a shoot, I don't pull out my camera until I'm at a shoot, and then I finish my shoot and I come home. What about everything else? Like, am I exploring world and life around me with my camera? Those are the questions that I ask now to see if I'm bettering myself as an artist. So you can ask yourself the same. Are you exploring the world with your camera? Are you exploring the things that you love with your camera? If not, maybe this is a great time to do that. I would keep a creative journal, something that you can write into, and then you can follow up on all of these ideas that come to your head. So ask yourself questions, right? Ask yourself from when you were a kid to now. The next thing that I would suggest that you do is fall in love with people, things, and places like a child would. Look at it from the eyes of a child and start sticking your camera in places that you normally wouldn't. Become more curious about even the things that you already know. Ask things why, and see if you can answer it using your camera. The one thing I want you to keep in mind is that you're not really doing any of this for anyone else. You are simply exercising your creative muscle so that it puts a fire under you. And once that fire is built and the flames are fanned and has built around you, no matter what happens around the world, that creative fire will never leave you. And you could be 70 years old, 80 years old, 90 years old, and still be in love with the craft. And that's what you want out of what you do. To be in love with something in that deep level requires you to explore it this way, give it time, and literally action it. Do the work every day. One of the books that I would recommend here is a book by Steven Pressfield called War of Art. And it talks about this idea of resistance that stops you from moving forward, doing the things that you're put on this earth to do. And resistance is this force. It's something that affects you, me, and everybody else. It's the way we approach it and the way we go about pushing resistance back is what this book is about. And I would highly recommend that you read this book. It's so tiny, you can read it in an hour, and it will get you started with thinking about art as something that's personal, something that you can take a journey down, and something that you can do every day.
One needs passion to do your best work, to be involved in situations that you believe in that give purpose to your life. My work, my art, my photography is something you never retire from. It's something that you do until your last breath. We just go on because that's our life and that's our passion that energizes us. That's what gives our life meaning and purpose. And you would never want to stop eating or sleeping or breathing, and that's the way I view my work.